The spoiled daughter of the CEO felt powerful, humiliating a simple-looking foreigner who was lost in the company's corridors. In front of everyone, she mocked. "Your accent is ridiculous. Go back to your country." She only stopped when she heard her father's desperate shout, who came running. "Stop now! You are humiliating our new majority partner." The girl's face turned white. The lobby of Sterling Mining's headquarters in Denver was a temple of glass and marble, a monument to the power and wealth Veronica Sterling considered her birthright. The echo of her designer heels on the polished floor was the only music that interested her, a melody that announced her arrival and demanded reverence. That morning, the air, usually calm and controlled, vibrated with an almost palpable tension. Employees whispered in corners, anxious glances crossing over computer screens. The company, her family's great legacy, had been saved from the brink of collapse by a massive investment, and today they would meet the face behind the capital that had rescued them. A mysterious Russian investor, a man whose name, Ivanov, was whispered with a mixture of fear and gratitude. To Veronica, however, he was just another piece on her father's chessboard, a tool to ensure her future and inheritance remained intact. She slid a finger across her phone's screen, not to check the company's stock prices, but to use the reflective surface as a makeshift mirror. A touch-up of lipstick, an adjustment to her perfectly coiffed hair. Her image was an asset as important as any other in the family business. It was then that a discreet figure approached, breaking the visual harmony of the space. A middle-aged man, in clothes that looked like they'd been bought at any department store, off the rack, without the precise cut that denoted power. The fabric of his jacket was plain, his shoes too sensible for this universe of luxury. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper as if it were a treasure map, and with a thick accent that grated on Veronica's ears, an English that stumbled over its own syllables. He asked, "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling's office." The voice was low, almost timid, that of someone who didn't belong. Veronica sized him up with a contempt she barely bothered to disguise. The smell of mothballs seemed to emanate from his clothes, an affront to the French perfume she wore. This man was a mistake, a stain on the impeccable scenery of her empire. "First, learn to speak proper English. Your accent is ridiculous," she snarled, her voice sharp and loud, designed to attract the attention she so adored. A hush fell over the lobby. All eyes turned to her. This was her stage. And second, this is a serious corporation, not a help desk for some lost tourist. If you're looking for a handout, the street is that way. Go back to your country. She gestured to the security guards, a royal command to her uniformed subjects, delighting in the man's powerlessness and the fear she saw on the faces of the employees. The man, however, did not shrink away. He just watched her, his grey eyes calm and penetrating, a serenity that infuriated her even more. How dare he not feel humiliated? It was at that moment that the metallic chime of the elevator echoed and her father, Arthur Sterling, emerged. His face, previously marked by the anxiety of waiting, contorted into a mask of pure panic upon seeing the scene. "Stop!" he shouted, his desperate voice reverberating off the marble. "Veronica, for God's sake, stop it right now!" He rushed toward them, his breath ragged. She turned, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Dad, I'm just getting rid of this." "You're not getting rid of anyone!" Arthur cut her off, sweat shining on his forehead. He turned to the foreigner and, to Veronica's absolute shock, gave a deep, deferential nod. "Mr. Ivanov, my deepest apologies. A million apologies. My daughter, she didn't know." The name hit her like a physical blow. Ivanov, the Russian mega-investor, the reclusive billionaire who had saved her family's fortune. Arthur turned to her, his eyes burning with fury and terror. "You idiot! You're humiliating our new majority shareholder." Mr. Ivanov raised a hand, silencing Arthur's despair. His lost tourist look dissolved, replaced by an authority as cold as a Siberian winter. Then, in perfect, unaccented English, he said, "I like to visit my investments unannounced, to see the real company culture." A calculated pause. "And I've seen it, a culture where arrogance is valued more than respect." He fixed his gaze on Arthur. "The new majority shareholder's first decision is effective immediately. Your daughter is out, and you, Arthur, are on probation. Pray the rest of your company has more character than the heiress you've raised." The silence that followed Ivanov's departure was more deafening than any scream. Every pair of eyes in the lobby was fixed on Veronica, not with the admiration or fear she used to inspire, but with a morbid curiosity, as if watching the fall of a statue. Her world, once a stage at her feet, had become a courtroom, and she was the defendant, convicted in a single humiliating instant. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. Her father's face was a canvas of horror and fury. He grabbed her arm, his fingers tightening with a force she had never felt from him, a force that truly hurt. "My office, now!" he hissed, his voice so low and laced with venom that it made her tremble more than if he had shouted. He dragged her across the lobby, past the employees who averted their gaze, feigning a sudden urgency in their papers or screens. The walk to the private elevator felt like an eternity, each step an echo of her disgrace. Inside the box of metal and glass, Arthur didn't let go. He just stared at her, his breath heavy, his eyes bloodshot. Veronica tried to speak, to stammer an excuse, an explanation, but the words died in her throat. As soon as the door to the lavish chairman's office closed, he released her with a shove. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he roared, his facade of control finally shattering. He paced like a caged animal. Years building this company, this legacy, and you destroy it all in 5 minutes of stupid arrogance. Veronica staggered back, falling into one of the leather armchairs that, until minutes ago, she had considered part of her personal furniture. "Dad, I didn't know. He looked like what? Poor, different. And since when does that give us the right to humiliate someone?" Arthur stopped in front of her, hands on his hips, his body trembling with rage. "That man isn't just a partner, you fool. He bought a majority stake when we were one step from bankruptcy. Our fortune, our family name, the roof over our heads, everything depends on his goodwill. He's not a partner, he's the owner." The word owner hung in the air, cold and final. Veronica felt a chill run down her spine. The scale of her mistake was beginning to take shape, vast and terrifying. "We'll fix this," she said, her voice weak, trying to cling to a sliver of hope. "I'll apologize. There is no we gay." He cut her off. Ivanov was clear. "You're out. And for me to have any chance of saving my own neck, of saving what's left of this company, I need to prove to him that his decision has been carried out. Immediately." He grabbed the phone on his desk. "Security, revoke all of Veronica Sterling's access credentials. Keycard, parking garage, everything. Cancel her corporate credit card. The company car is to be returned by the end of the day." Veronica stood up, incredulous. "You can't do this. This is my inheritance." "There's no inheritance without a company," he yelled back, his face red. "Your life of luxury, the money you spend without a thought, it's over. It's over, Veronica." He pointed to the door. "Now get out. Security will escort you from the building." The door opened and 2 uniformed men, the same ones she had gestured to earlier, entered. They wouldn't meet her eyes. With her heart hammering in her chest and tears finally welling up, she walked between them, out of the office, out of her life. As she reached the main entrance, the afternoon sun blinded her. The noise of the city assaulted her. Automatically, she reached into her purse for her sunglasses, her phone, the key to her car, and the panic hit her with full force. Her purse, with everything inside, had been left on her desk. In the office that was now forbidden to her, standing on the granite sidewalk under the harsh Denver sun, Veronica felt like a foreigner in her own city. The stream of cars on the avenue, the sound of horns, and the murmur of people passing by were a cacophony that assaulted her senses. A world that had always existed on the other side of the tinted windows of her luxury car. The humiliation burned on her face, hotter than the sun. Her first instinct, born from a lifetime of privilege, was denial. This was a misunderstanding, a stunt by her father to teach her a lesson. Soon he would call her back, laughing, and everything would return to normal. With this fragile conviction, she turned and marched back toward the revolving glass doors. One of the security guards, the same man who had so often opened her car door, stood in her way. His body was a polite but unyielding barrier. "Miss Sterling, I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to enter." The formality in his voice, stripped of any former subservience, was another slap in the face. "You don't understand," she said, trying to maintain her composure. "I work here. I need to get my purse." "Mr. Sterling's orders were clear, miss. Your belongings will be sent to your residence." The word residence struck her. She didn't have her keys. Her apartment, a lavish loft whose assets and expenses were paid for by the company, was it also part of the empire from which she had been cast out? Panic began to bubble in her chest, cold and suffocating. She looked around, desperate. People passed by, immersed in their own lives, oblivious to the collapse of her universe. She, who had always been the center of attention, was now invisible, an anonymous figure in the crowd. All her assets, her unrestricted access to family money, the fortune she considered hers, had been cut off with a single phone call. She was on the street, literally without a penny to her name. For the first time in her life, Veronica felt real fear. A fear that wasn't about losing a deal or an investment, but about survival itself. How would she get home? How would she get in? Who could she call? The irony was cruel. She knew dozens of people, but didn't know a single phone number by heart. Everything was on the phone, in her purse, inside that building that was now an enemy fortress. Her eyes scanned the street for a solution and landed on a woman sitting on a nearby park bench. She was an older woman with grey hair pulled back in a simple bun, wearing a blue cleaner's uniform. She had a weary air, but her eyes, small and observant, watched Veronica with an expression that wasn't pity, but a serene understanding. Veronica vaguely recognized her. She was one of the cleaning crew from a neighboring building. On any other day, she would have walked past this woman without even noticing her existence. But today, the woman represented a possibility, a tool, swallowing the pride that was as bitter as bile. Veronica approached. "Excuse me," she began, her voice coming out more arrogant than she intended. "I need to use your phone." The woman, whose name was Clara, looked up slowly. She seemed neither surprised nor intimidated. "Is there a problem, honey?" she asked, her voice calm and a little raspy. The unexpected kindness disarmed her. I need to make a call. It's an emergency." Clara studied her for a moment, then pulled an old flip phone from her apron pocket with a small screen and physical buttons. "It's a prepaid. The call can't be too long," she said, holding out the device. Veronica took it as if it were an alien artifact. She dialed the number of her best friend, Bianca, the first person she thought of to rescue her. It went to voicemail. She tried another and another. No one answered. They were all friends for parties, for shopping, for sunny days by the pool. Were they friends for stormy days? The doubt settled in, cold and terrifying. Finally, a last attempt. She called her parents' house, her old home. A familiar voice answered. It was the housekeeper, Rosa. "Rosa, it's me, Veronica," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Miss Veronica, where are you? Your father called and said..." "Rosa, it doesn't matter. I need you to help me." On the other end of the line, there was a hesitation, followed by a muffled sound. Then her father's voice came on the phone, cold as steel. "Veronica, listen carefully. You are no longer welcome in this house. Rosa is forbidden to help you. You're on your own." And the line went dead. The sound of the disconnected call echoed in Veronica's brain like a final sentence. She stood there, holding Clara's small phone, the sun-warmed plastic feeling like the only real thing in a world that was dissolving around her. Her father's voice, devoid of any affection, was an open wound. "You're on your own." The phrase was an abyss, and she was standing at the edge, staring into nothing. Her shoulders slumped. The armor of arrogance that had sustained her for her entire life cracked, and for an instant, the scared little girl behind the facade appeared. The tears she had held back with such effort now streamed freely, hot and silent, tracing clean paths through her expensive makeup. She returned the phone to Clara, who accepted it with a nod. The older woman didn't say, "I told you so," nor did she offer empty words of comfort. She just watched her with a quiet compassion, a silent witness to her unraveling. "Thank you," Veronica whispered, the word foreign in her mouth. It was a term she usually used as a formality, not as a genuine expression of gratitude. Clara rummaged in her apron pocket again and pulled out a slightly crumpled $5 bill. "Here, for the bus," she said, her voice gentle. Veronica recoiled, as if the bill burned her. The gesture, though kind, was the final proof of her new status. She, Veronica Sterling, heiress to an incalculable fortune, was being offered a handout by a cleaning lady. Her wounded pride roared within her, one last desperate attempt to assert itself. "I don't need your money," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Clara wasn't offended. She just put the bill away with a sigh. "Pride won't fill your stomach, kid, and those shoes weren't made for walking." The practical comment about her designer shoes brought her back to painful reality. She looked down at her own feet, clad in stilettos that now felt like instruments of torture. Clara was right. Where would she go? What would she do? The vastness of her assets, the family's holdings, the net worth her father loved to mention at business dinners, all of it had become an unreachable abstraction. She turned and began to walk, aimlessly. Every step was agony, the leather pinching, the heel threatening to snap on every uneven patch of sidewalk. The city, which had always been her playground, now revealed itself as a hostile labyrinth. The sounds assaulted her. The stares of passers-by seemed to judge her, dissecting her impeccable appearance that was now coming undone under the stress and heat. Sweat began to stain the silk of her blouse. A desperate plan began to form in her mind. Bianca, her best friend. She hadn't answered the phone, but maybe she was home. Bianca's apartment was a fortress of luxury, a safe haven just a few blocks away. The idea of getting there, of taking a shower, sinking into a soft sofa and telling her tragic story, hoping for sympathy and help, became her only lifeline. The walk turned into a pilgrimage. She focused on the goal, ignoring the pain in her feet and the mounting humiliation. Finally, the imposing facade of Bianca's building came into view. It was a place she knew well, the stage for countless parties and secrets. The doorman recognized her immediately, his face breaking into a smile. "Miss Veronica, what a surprise! Miss Bianca didn't mention you were coming." For a brief moment, the normalcy of that treatment comforted her. "I know. I decided to surprise her," she lied, forcing a smile. The doorman, obliging as ever, buzzed her in. "Go on up." Relief washed over her as the elevator ascended silently to the penthouse. She fixed her smudged makeup with her fingers, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell. Hope pulsed in her chest. The door would open, and her friend would embrace her. Everything would be okay. The door opened, but it wasn't Bianca standing there. It was Ryan, her friend's boyfriend. He looked her up and down, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face, a smile that said he knew everything. And, to Veronica's absolute horror, he was holding her phone in his hands. The sight of her own phone in Ryan's hands was like a punch to the gut. The device, an extension of her identity, was now a weapon pointed at her. His smile was confirmation that her downfall was no longer a corporate secret, but delicious gossip, circulating among those she considered her inner circle. The relief she had felt seconds before turned to ice in her veins. "Ryan," she said, her voice a thread, "what are you doing with my phone?" He dangled it slightly, enjoying the power the small object gave him. "Your father called Bianca, told her the good news, and asked for a little favor, that she keep you away. Seems you've become persona non grata." Each word was delivered with a cruel pleasure, savoring her humiliation. "She asked me to come down and give you your purse. She doesn't want you coming up." He held out her handbag, but not the phone. "Bianca doesn't want to talk to me?" Veronica asked. Disbelief, warring with the pain of betrayal. Their friendship, built on years of shared secrets and mutual loyalty, was dissolving before her eyes. Ryan shrugged, a gesture of indifference that wounded her deeply. "She's busy, planning her engagement party. Without you on the guest list, of course." The information landed on her with the weight of an anvil. Bianca was engaged and hadn't told her. The secret, kept while she was still useful, was revealed now that she had become a liability. It was the final proof that their friendship was just another asset in her life, valuable only as long as it paid social dividends. Veronica took the purse, the Italian leather now feeling cheap and heavy. Her fingers closed around the strap, the only familiar thing in the chaos. "My phone, Ryan," he smiled again, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Oh, this, your dad said the corporate plan was cancelled. And, well, I kind of took a peek at your photo gallery. Some interesting stuff. I think I'll hold on to it for a while, as an insurance policy." The euphemism for blackmail hung in the air, venomous and clear. He knew there were secrets there, information that could do even more damage to her family's already tarnished reputation. She had nothing to offer, no capital to negotiate with. She was completely at his mercy. The apartment door closed softly, leaving her alone in the quiet, climate-controlled hallway, a space that represented everything she had just lost. She rode the elevator down in a stupor, the motor's soft hum echoing the emptiness in her head. The doorman, who had smiled before, now looked at her with an expression of pity and discomfort. He knew. Everyone knew. The news of her fall had spread like wildfire, consuming her identity, her history, her safety net. As she exited the building, night was beginning to fall, the city lights coming on like distant, indifferent stars. The pain in her feet was a constant agony, a physical reminder of her new reality. She opened her purse, her hands trembling, desperately searching for something that could help her. She found her wallet. Opening it, reality punched her once more. No cash, just a row of credit cards, all of them now useless pieces of colored plastic. Fool's gold. Behind the cards, however, was something she had completely forgotten. A small, crumpled business card. It belonged to her maternal grandmother, Helena, a woman she barely knew, who lived in a simple, distant neighborhood, a side of the city Veronica had always avoided. Her mother had cut ties with Helena years ago, for reasons Veronica never bothered to learn, considering the grandmother an embarrassing relic of an unglamorous past. But now, that small piece of paper, with an address and a landline number, was the only connection she had left in the world, a faint, fragile hope, born of utter desperation. She looked at the address, then at the busy avenue. It was far, a distance that seemed impossible to cover on foot, in these shoes, and with her soul in shreds. The decision to find her grandmother was not an act of hope, but of pure surrender. Helena represented everything Veronica despised: simplicity, a lack of ambition, the absence of material wealth, But at that moment, the alternative was the street, an abyss of vulnerability that terrified her. With the business card in hand, she dragged herself to a bus stop, the blue and white sign, a symbol of a universe that was completely foreign to her. The line was a cross-section of the humanity she had always observed from a distance. Tired workers, students with headphones, mothers with small children. She was a penguin in a desert, her designer clothes and expensive shoes a scream of displacement. When the bus finally arrived, a noisy, crowded metal beast, she hesitated. The simple act of climbing the steps felt like a social descent. People stared at her, their looks ranging from curiosity to resentment. She felt the flush of shame burn her face, but need was stronger than pride. Inside the vehicle, the air was hot and thick with the smell of sweat and exhaustion. She clung to a metal pole, trying to keep her balance as the bus lurched forward. Every jolt was torture for her feet. The journey was a blur of neighborhoods she only knew by name from the news, usually associated with problems that weren't hers. The luxurious facades of her world gave way to plainer buildings, houses with peeling paint, and small businesses. It was like traveling to another country, one where the capital that ruled her life had no value. She felt naked, stripped of all the status symbols that defined her, without the car, without the credit cards, without the sterling name opening doors. Who was she? The question echoed in her mind, frightening and unanswered. After what felt like an eternity, she finally got off at the stop indicated by a helpful passenger. The street was quiet, tree-lined, with small, modest but well-kept houses. There was a silence that contrasted with the constant noise of her former life. She found her grandmother's house number. It was a simple structure with a small front garden full of colorful flowers that seemed to defy the city concrete. A low iron gate creaked softly in the breeze. For a long moment, Veronica stood on the sidewalk, her heart pounding erratically. What would she say? How would she explain her presence here after years of silence and indifference? She was the granddaughter who never called, who never visited. Now, she was appearing on her grandmother's doorstep like a beggar. Hesitation paralyzed her. Maybe it was better to leave, to try something else, anything else. But where? She had nowhere to go. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the gate open and walked up the short stone path. Before she could knock, the front door opened. A woman with completely white hair in a braid and surprisingly vivid blue eyes stood there. She wore a simple dress and an apron. It was Helena. She looked at Veronica, not with surprise, but with a kind of resigned recognition, as if she had been expecting her. "I knew you'd come one day," Helena said, her voice calm, without a hint of accusation or triumph. "Your father always had a habit of building his towers too tall. They always fall." The observation, precise and merciless, disarmed Veronica completely. She had expected questions, maybe even a refusal, but not this quiet, almost prophetic acceptance. The tears returned, this time not of anger or humiliation, but of a deep weariness, an exhaustion of the soul. "Grandma," she began, the words sounding strange and childish. "I have nowhere to go." Helena just nodded. She opened the door a little wider, the gesture a silent invitation. "Come in, child, it's getting cold." As she crossed the threshold of that modest house, Veronica felt she wasn't just entering a shelter, but a whole new world. A world whose rules and values she would have to learn from scratch. The door closed behind her, and outside, in the garden, a small, hand-painted wooden sign swayed gently, bearing an inscription Veronica hadn't noticed before. Carved into it was a single, enigmatic Russian word, Sudba, destiny. Helena's house was small, but every inch seemed filled with a life Veronica had never known. The air smelled of chamomile tea and old wood, a scent that clung to the crochet curtains and time-worn furniture. It was a world away from her minimalist loft, where the surfaces were cold and the only smell was that of expensive air fresheners. Helena led her to a soft armchair, which sank under her weight with a familiar sigh. The grandmother moved about the compact kitchen with a quiet efficiency, putting a kettle on to boil. Veronica, perched on the edge of the chair, felt like a displaced luxury item in an antique shop. Finally, she dared to take off the shoes that had been torturing her, her feet throbbing in protest. The relief was so intense, it almost made her cry again. Helena returned with a basin of warm water and Epsom salts. Without a word, she knelt and submerged Veronica's wounded feet in the water. The gesture was so unexpected, so humble, and so maternal that it broke another barrier within her. "And no one's ever done this for me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know," Helena replied, simply. While Veronica's feet soaked, Helena served her a cup of tea. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but contemplative. Veronica, for the first time, truly observed her surroundings. There were books on dusty shelves, small wooden figurines, and in one corner, a shelf of Russian nesting dolls, matryoshkas, painted in bright colors. The image of the sign in the garden came back to her. "Grandma, why do you have so many Russian things? That sign in your garden." "Sudba, what does it mean?" Helena looked up from what she was doing, and for the first time, Veronica saw a shadow of old pain in her eyes. "It means destiny," she said, her voice low. "It's a reminder that some things are written, no matter how hard we try to run from them." She dried her hands on her apron and walked to a small chest of drawers, from which she took a dark wooden box. "My family isn't from here, Veronica. We came from Russia many years ago. We came with little, but with many memories." She opened the box. Inside were yellowed letters, a few medals, and a single faded photograph. She handed it to Veronica. The photo showed a much younger version of her grandmother, smiling, next to a kind-looking man. Between them stood a small boy, with a serious face and intense eyes that seemed to pierce the paper. Veronica felt an inexplicable shiver. Those eyes, she knew them. "This was Dmitri, a great friend of our family, almost a brother," Helena said, pointing to the man. "And this is his son, Sergei." The name hit her with the force of a lightning bolt. Sergei Ivanov. It was him. The boy in the photo was the man who, hours earlier, had destroyed her world. "No, it can't be," Veronica stammered, her heart racing. "How? Why?" Helena took the photo back, her gaze lost in the past. "Because Destiny, my granddaughter, has a long memory and scores to settle." She fixed her blue eyes on Veronica's, and the calm in her voice gave way to a sharp intensity that made Veronica hold her breath. The investment Sergei Ivanov made in Sterling Mining wasn't a business deal for profit or dividends. It was a collection. The seed money your father used to build that entire empire, the genesis of all your fortune. He got it by destroying Dmitri's family. Helena paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "That man didn't come to save your inheritance, child. He came to take back what was stolen from his family. Over 30 years ago." Helena's revelation hung in the room like a dense fog, rewriting the entire history Veronica had ever known. The sterling fortune, the pillar of her identity, wasn't a monument to success, but a castle built on the ruins of someone else's life. The image of her father, the ruthless and admired CEO, shattered, replaced by that of a man whose wealth had dark origins. The contempt she had felt for Mr. Ivanov morphed into a confusing, dizzying feeling. He wasn't a barbarian invader, he was a creditor, coming to collect not just money, but justice. The humiliation she had suffered in the company lobby took on a new meaning, a layer of cosmic irony that made her feel small and foolish. "How?" was the only word Veronica could manage. The question contained a universe of disbelief. How could her father, the man who had taught her about business and integrity, at least in public, be capable of such a thing? Helena sat in the armchair opposite Veronica, her wrinkled hands resting in her lap. She seemed to have aged years in minutes, as if revisiting the past was a physical burden. Arthur and Dimitri were young and ambitious, she began, her voice low and steady like the ticking of an old clock. They were partners. They had a small business, a prospecting claim on land everyone said was barren. Dimitri had the geological knowledge, inherited from his family in Russia, and your father had the smooth talk, the ability to secure small investments. They were a good team. She paused, her eyes fixed on an invisible point on the wall, and they found it. They found a vein of precious ore, far richer than they had ever dreamed. It was the chance of a lifetime, the promise of a fortune that would change generations. Veronica listened, paralyzed. It was the founding story of Sterling Mining, the same one her father told in interviews, but with a crucial piece missing. In Arthur's version, he was the sole hero of the narrative. "What happened?" Veronica whispered. "What did my father do?" "Greed," Helena answered, the word dropping into the room like a stone. "Your father saw the scale of the wealth to come and didn't want to share it. Dimitri trusted him completely. He handled the operational side, out in the fields, while your father handled the paperwork in the city. Arthur used that trust against him. He forged documents, created non-existent liabilities, diluted Dimitri's shares until they were worthless. He convinced the investors that Dimitri was incompetent and forced him out of the partnership, legally but immorally. Dimitri lost everything, the business, the capital, his reputation. He was left penniless. The story was so brutal in its simplicity that Veronica felt a knot form in her stomach. This wasn't a complex stock market play. It was pure and simple betrayal. Did they ever see each other again?" Veronica asked, dreading the answer. "Dimitri tried to fight it in court, but your father used his newfound money to hire the best lawyers. He crushed Dimitri, humiliated and broke. Dimitri returned to Russia with his young son, Sergei. He died a few years later, a broken man. But before he died, he told his son the whole story. He left him not an inheritance of money, but an inheritance of memory. And Sergei never forgot." Helena looked directly at Veronica, her blue eyes piercing. For 30 years, Sergei Ivanov built his own empire, a multi-billion-dollar fortune in dollars, euros, gold, crypto, anything you can imagine. But he never took his eyes off Sterling Mining. He waited. He waited for the right moment, when your father was vulnerable, in need of a major investment. And then he came to collect what belonged to his family. Not just the money, Veronica. He came to claim the soul of the company that should have been his. Veronica leaned back in the chair, her body trembling. Her suffering, which hours before had seemed the center of the universe, was now just a small echo of a much larger, older pain. She wasn't the primary victim in this tragedy. She was merely collateral damage in Sergei Ivanov's long and patient revenge. The night at Helena's house was long and sleepless. Veronica lay in a small, soft bed in a neatly kept guest room, but her mind was a whirlwind. Her grandmother's words echoed in her head, overlapping with the images of her own humiliation. Every luxury she had ever had, every trip, every expensive piece of clothing, was now stained by the origin of her family's fortune. It wasn't just the loss of her status that tormented her, but the loss of her own history, the realization that her life had been a gilded lie. The grief she felt was no longer just for herself. It was a mourning for the family she thought she had, for the father she had idolized, and for the innocence she had lost forever. In the morning, Helena's simple routine was a stark contrast to Veronica's internal chaos. The grandmother moved through the house with a deliberate calm, watering her plants, brewing coffee whose aroma filled the air with a painful normality. They sat at the small kitchen table for breakfast. The bread was fresh from the corner bakery, and the butter was served on a simple ceramic dish. There was no silverware or fine china. "You need to eat," Helena said, pushing a coffee cup toward Veronica. Veronica took a sip, the hot liquid anchoring her to the present. What am I going to do?" she asked, her voice weak. It was a genuine question, stripped of all arrogance. For the first time, she had no plan, no goal, no next step laid out. Helena watched her for a long moment. "First, you're going to stop thinking of yourself as the only victim in this story." The grandmother's frankness was like a splash of cold water. "Your pain is real, but it's the consequence of a much greater injustice. You were a princess in a stolen kingdom. The fall hurts, but the throne was never yours by right." Veronica looked down, the truth in Helena's words hitting her squarely. She had never thought beyond herself, her own desires and entitlements. The world had always revolved around her. "Your father called," Helena continued calmly. Veronica's head snapped up, her heart giving a treacherous leap of hope. "He wanted to know if you were here. I said you were. He offered me money to throw you out." The blow was swift and brutal, extinguishing the tiny flame that had been kindled. "He said your presence anywhere associated with the family was a liability, a risk to his negotiations with Mr. Ivanov." The word liability struck her hard. That's how her father saw her now. Not as a daughter, but as a negative item on his business ledger. "I told him," Helena continued, her gaze steady, "that my granddaughter was not for sale, and that his fortune could buy a lot of lawyers, but it couldn't buy my loyalty." In that moment, Veronica felt a wave of gratitude for this woman she barely knew, a gratitude so intense it left her speechless. Helena was the only person who had stood up for her, not for who she was or what she represented, but simply for being her granddaughter. "What is Mr. Ivanov going to do with the company?" Veronica asked, her mind turning to the center of the hurricane. "Is he going to destroy it? Sell everything?" "I don't know," Helena admitted. "Sergei is Dmitri's son. He has his father's heart, a heart that values justice more than profit. But he has also spent 30 years being shaped by pain and revenge. He may have amassed a fortune in Bitcoin and stocks, but the currency he really wants to collect now is something else." She got up and fetched an old address book. "If you want answers, if you want to start fixing anything, you can't stay here feeling sorry for yourself. You need to understand the scale of the damage your family caused." She wrote an address on a slip of paper. "This is Dmitri's old secretary, Mrs. Matilda. She was the only employee who stood by him to the end, lost her job over it. She knows details that even I don't. Go talk to her. Hear the story from someone who lived it. Maybe then you'll understand that your journey isn't about getting your wealth back, but about finding your humanity." The address Helena gave her was in a working-class neighborhood, a tangle of narrow streets and row houses. It was a setting so far removed from her previous reality that Veronica felt like an anthropologist exploring an unknown civilization. Dressed in clothes borrowed from her grandmother, simple slacks and a cotton blouse that looked decades old but were impeccably clean, she felt anonymous, stripped of her designer armor. At every corner, she expected to feel looks of contempt, but people barely noticed her, immersed in their own routines. The indifference was, in a way, more disconcerting than hostility. She found Matilda's house, a small building with geraniums in the window boxes. A woman with short white hair and a face lined with wrinkles that seemed to tell stories answered the door. Her eyes, behind thick-rimmed glasses, were shrewd and showed no surprise. "I figured an Almeida would show up sooner or later," Matilda said, her voice firm, without hostility but also without warmth. "Come in." The inside of the house was meticulously tidy, filled with picture frames showing children and grandchildren. It smelled of cornbread baking in the oven. Matilda led her to a small living room and offered her a glass of water. Veronica, feeling like a student before a principal, explained who she was and why she was there. She recounted, in a brief and humiliating summary, the events of the past few days. Matilda listened in silence, not interrupting, her hands folded in her lap. When Veronica finished, the old woman sighed. "Your father was a charming man," Matilda began, her gaze distant. "He could sell anything to anyone. And Dimitri, my boss, he was the soul of the business. He saw no evil in people. He thought a handshake and a man's word were the only contract needed. It was that nobility that destroyed him." She got up and took out an old photo album. The yellowed pages showed images of two smiling young men, Arthur and Dimitri, on a dusty plot of land, pointing at maps, celebrating with a cheap bottle of sparkling wine. They were the picture of hope and partnership. "I saw it all," Matilda continued, turning the pages slowly. "I saw your father starting to come in later, holding secret meetings. I saw the lawyers in expensive suits coming and going while Dimitri was out in the field, covered in dirt, working from sunup to sundown. I warned him. I told him something was wrong with the papers, that the expense reports looked inflated, that the share structure was changing without his knowledge. But he wouldn't listen. 'Arthur is my brother,' he'd say." The pain in Matilda's voice was palpable, a wound that 30 years had not healed. The day he was forced out of his own company, he came to my office. He wasn't angry. He was broken, like a man who discovers his entire faith was placed in a false god. "He gave me this." Matilda opened a drawer and took out a small matryoshka, the Russian nesting doll. It was different from the ones Veronica had seen at her grandmother's, simpler, more worn. He told me, "Keep this. It's the last valuable thing I have left. It represents the soul of our business, a promise within a promise." He asked me to one day, if I ever had the chance, give it to his son, Sergei. Veronica stared at the small wooden doll. It was such a simple object, yet it was laden with the weight of a lifetime of betrayal. It represented the true lost inheritance, one of trust and dreams, not of property and assets. "Does Mr. Ivanov know you have this?" Veronica asked. "I don't know if he even remembers me," Matilda said. "But I never forgot. I never forgot Dimitri's kindness, nor your father's cruelty." She looked at Veronica, her eyes searching. "You look like him, you know. Your father. You have the same determination in your eyes. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" Matilda then held the doll out to Veronica. "Maybe destiny didn't bring you here to listen to an old story. Maybe it brought you here to finish it." The small wooden doll rested in Matilda's outstretched palm, a bridge between the past and the future. To accept it would not just be to take an object, it would be to accept a responsibility, a mission Veronica had never imagined was hers. Veronica took the matryoshka. The weight of the small wooden doll in her hand was disproportionate to its size. It was the weight of a broken promise, a destroyed life, and a debt that transcended any monetary value. To look at that object was to look at her family's original sin. For the first time, the anger she felt toward her father wasn't for what he had done to her, but for what he had done to Dimitri. A seismic shift occurred within her. A transfer of loyalty from her surname to the justice of the story she had just heard. "Thank you," she said to Matilda, her voice firm. "I know what I have to do." Leaving Matilda's house was like exiting a shrine. The world outside looked the same, but Veronica was a different person. Self-pity had been replaced by purpose. She didn't know if she could fix anything, but she knew she had to try. Silence and passivity were no longer an option. Back at Helena's, she found her grandmother sitting on the porch, knitting. She told her about the meeting with Matilda and showed her the doll. Helena took it, her fingers tracing the worn wood with a reverent tenderness. "The soul of the business," she whispered. "Dimitri was always a poet." "Grandma, I need to talk to him." "To Mr. Ivanov," Veronica said, the decision sounding clear and irrevocable in her own voice. "I can't undo what my father did, but I can't leave things as they are. He needs to know that not all Sterlings are like my father." Helena looked at her, a glimmer of pride in her blue eyes. "He's not an easy man to find, Veronica. He's built walls around himself, not just of wealth, but of distrust. But you know how, don't you? Veronica insisted. You were friends with his family. Helena sighed, a sound heavy with memories. There was a place, a small park, where our families used to go on weekends. Dmitri and I planted an oak sapling there the day Sergei was born. It was his tree of life. I don't know if he still goes there, but it's the only place I can imagine where the billionaire Sergei Ivanov still allows the boy Sergei to exist. With her grandmother's directions and the little money Helena insisted she take for transportation, Veronica set out the next day. The park was in an upscale part of the city, an oasis of green among skyscrapers. It was a place she had been to before, but never with the awareness she had now. She found the oak tree. The sapling Helena had described was now a mighty tree, its branches spreading like protective arms. And sitting on a bench under its shade was him, Sergei Ivanov. He wasn't wearing the lost tourist disguise. He wore an expensive suit, but without ostentation. He was looking out at the lake, his expression thoughtful and melancholic. For an instant, Veronica saw the boy from the photograph, the serious-eyed child who had lost everything. Fear paralyzed her. What could she, who had been the personification of the arrogance he so despised, say to this man? He had seen her at her worst. Now, she was coming to him at her most vulnerable. Taking a deep breath, she approached. He didn't seem to notice her until she stopped a few feet away. He turned, and his grey eyes recognized her instantly. The coldness returned, an icy curtain dropping over whatever emotion might have been there. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice devoid of any inflection, "have you come to finish the job and have me thrown out of the park too?" The mockery was sharp, but Veronica didn't back down. She had nothing left to lose. Instead of replying, she just held out her hand, opening it to reveal the small, worn matryoshka. Sergei Ivanov's eyes widened. The mask of coldness cracked, and for a brief second she saw a flash of something that looked like excruciating pain. Sergei Ivanov stared at the small doll in Veronica's palm as if he were seeing a ghost. The world around them, the sound of children playing, the wind rustling through the oak leaves, seemed to vanish. To him, that object wasn't just painted wood. It was a portal to a painful past, a tangible symbol of everything that had been stolen from his family. His hand, accustomed to signing billion-dollar contracts and moving global financial markets, trembled slightly as he reached out and took the matryoshka. He turned it over and over, his fingers tracing the familiar lines and faded paint. A lifetime of contained anger, of iron discipline and meticulously planned revenge seemed to crumble at that simple touch. Veronica watched in silence, her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't come here to ask for forgiveness for herself, nor for her father. She had come to deliver a message from the past, to close a circle she hadn't even known existed until a few days ago. Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice hoarse, the cold authority replaced by a vulnerability that humanized him instantly. "From Matilda," Veronica answered. "Your father's secretary. She kept it all these years. She said he gave it to her on his last day, saying it was the soul of the business." Hearing his father's words, spoken by the woman he despised most, Sergei's eyes filled with tears. He didn't wipe them away. He just stood there, under the tree of his childhood, the ruthless billionaire coming undone to reveal the orphaned boy beneath. "My father was always a dreamer," he said, more to himself than to her. He believed in goodness, in trust. Your father used that belief to destroy him. I spent 30 years building an empire on a single principle. Trust no one. Every deal, every investment, every share I bought was a step to get here, to take back what he stole from us." He finally looked up and met her gaze. The pain in his eyes was an ocean. "And when I arrived, the first person I met was you, the embodiment of everything I hated. The arrogance born from stolen wealth. It was so poetic. So easy to hate you. And now you bring me this." He held up the doll. Why? The question was genuine. He couldn't understand her motive. She was the heiress of the empire he had come to dismantle. She should be fighting him, not handing him relics of his past. Because it's the right thing to do, Veronica said. The answer simple, but coming from the depths of her newly discovered soul. I didn't know. I lived my whole life on a lie, enjoying a fortune that came at a terrible cost. I can't change what my father did, and I'm not here to ask you to forgive him, or to save the company, or my old lifestyle. I'm here because your father's story deserved to be honored, and because the debt needed to be acknowledged. In that moment, something shifted between them. The chasm of hatred and contempt was bridged by a silent, mutual understanding. They were both, in different ways, prisoners of the same story, children of a legacy of betrayal. Sergei looked at the tree, then at the doll in his hand. He had spent his entire life focused on a single goal, revenge. But now, with victory in his grasp, he felt an unexpected emptiness. Destroying Sterling Mining would bring justice, but it wouldn't bring his father back. It wouldn't erase the years of struggle and loneliness. Veronica, the girl he had planned to crush like an insect in his path, had shown him something he had forgotten: humanity. She, who had everything to lose, had come to him asking for nothing, only to deliver a symbol of respect and acknowledgement of his pain. Revenge suddenly seemed like a poor consolation prize. He opened the matryoshka, and inside was another, smaller one. He opened the second and found a third. In the last and smallest doll, there was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper, one that not even Matilda knew existed. With trembling fingers, Sergei unrolled it. It was his father's handwriting. On it, a single sentence in Russian: "The best investment is in people, not in stone." Dmitri's message, read under the shade of the oak tree, was the final straw that broke the dam of Sergei's contained emotions. The best investment is in people, not in stone. It was his father's life philosophy. The same nobility that had led to his ruin, but also the essence of who he was. Sergei had spent half his life obsessed with the stones, the ore, the stocks, the assets, the vast fortune he had built to avenge his father, and had completely forgotten the second part of the phrase. He looked at Veronica, who waited silently, unaware of the note's content. He saw in her, for the first time, not the arrogant heiress, but a person who, when confronted with the truth, had chosen honor over pride. A person who, in an act of courage, had brought him the final piece of his own life's puzzle. The revenge he had planned suddenly felt empty. Destroying Arthur Sterling and his company would bring closure, but it would be a bitter closure. His father's message offered him another path. "There will be a board meeting tomorrow morning," Sergei said, his voice now calm and controlled. But the earlier coldness was gone, replaced by a thoughtful gravity. "I will be there to announce my intentions as the majority shareholder. I would like you to be present." Veronica was taken aback. "Me? I have no connection to the company anymore." "You do," he replied enigmatically. "Be there." The next morning, Veronica walked into the lobby of Sterling Mining once more. She wore the same simple clothes from the day before. The employees, who days ago had feared and then scorned her, now looked at her with confused curiosity. She didn't care. Her journey was no longer about the perceptions of others. She was escorted to the boardroom, the same room where she had watched her father preside with absolute power so many times. Arthur was already there, his face pale and drawn, looking like a ghost in his own company. When he saw his daughter, his eyes widened in panic and rage. "Ma, what is she doing here?" he hissed to one of Sergei's assistants. Sergei Ivanov entered the room, and silence was immediate. He didn't take the seat at the head of the table, the place of power. Instead, he remained standing, the small matryoshka in his hand. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice resonating in the room. "As you know, I have acquired controlling interest in this company, and I have spent the last 30 years planning for this day. Planning to dismantle this company, brick by brick, sell off its assets, and erase the sterling name from the business world. It would be retribution for the betrayal my father, Dmitry Ivanov, suffered at the hands of this company's founder, Arthur Sterling. He paused, looking directly at Arthur, who shrank in his chair. However, Sergei continued, new information has been brought to me. Information that has reminded me of my father's legacy. A legacy that is not about vengeance, but about building. He turned to the board. Sterling Mining will not be destroyed. On the contrary, it will be rebuilt, but under new values. As of today, the company will undergo a complete restructuring. The name will be changed to Ivanov Sterling Mining, to honor both original founders. A murmur went through the room. Arthur stared, shocked. But the leadership must change, Sergei said, his tone hardening. Arthur, you are removed as CEO and from your position on the board, effective immediately. Your personal assets and fortune will be audited to determine the exact value that was embezzled from my father with compounded interest. You will leave this company with only what is rightfully yours after that restitution is made. The sentence was final, delivered with the coldness of a judge. Arthur opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was a deposed king. Then, Sergei did something no one expected. He looked at Veronica. This company needs a conscience. It needs someone who remembers the human cost behind the profits and dividends. Therefore, I am establishing a new foundation, funded by a significant portion of the company's profits. A foundation dedicated to social projects in the communities affected by our mining operations and to ensuring ethical business practices. And the director of this foundation will be Miss Veronica Sterling. Veronica felt the floor drop out from under her. She, who had been cast out, was now being offered a way back in, but in a role she had never imagined. It wasn't a position of power or luxury, but one of service and responsibility. She proved to me, Sergei said, looking at the stunned faces of the board members, that the best investment is, indeed, in people, and that even a Sterling can learn to honor the true value of things. The boardroom remained in a stunned silence after Sergei's announcement. Arthur Sterling, the man who had been the center of that corporate universe, seemed to have shrunk in his chair, the arrogance drained from his face, leaving behind only the shell of a defeated man. Veronica, for her part, felt a mixture of disbelief and a strange, overwhelming peace. Sergei's offer was not a return to her former status. It was an invitation to a new beginning, a path she had unknowingly started down herself in the last few days. It was not a return to power, but an opportunity for redemption. She accepted, not with the presumption of old, but with the humility of someone who understands the weight of the responsibility entrusted to her. The transformation of Sterling Mining was swift and profound. Under Sergei's new leadership, the company's culture shifted. Ostentation gave way to efficiency, and arrogance was replaced by a focus on integrity and social responsibility. The name Ivanov Sterling Mining, etched onto the building's facade, was no longer a symbol of a single family's power, but a constant reminder of a complex history of betrayal and, finally, reconciliation. Veronica threw herself into her new role. She traded her former corner office with its panoramic view for a modest room on the same floor as the geologists and engineers. She traveled to the mining towns, not in private jets, but in dusty pickup trucks. She listened to the stories of the workers and their families, understanding for the first time the real impact of the business that had sustained her life of luxury. She learned about environmental liabilities, about the importance of investing in education and healthcare for local communities. She discovered a capacity for empathy in herself that she never knew she possessed. Her job wasn't about managing cash flow or maximizing returns. It was about creating a positive legacy, turning the wealth generated from the earth into well-being for people. She and Sergei developed a relationship of professional respect. He was her boss, but also an unlikely mentor. He taught her about the side of business her father had never shown her, the side of patience, long-term strategy, and above all, honor. He, in turn, saw in her a living reminder of his father's message, proof that change and growth were possible. A year later, Veronica visited her grandmother. Helena's house was the same, a sanctuary of peace amid the city's hustle. They sat on the porch, drinking tea, as the afternoon sun gilded the small garden. Veronica told her about her projects, about the schools and clinics the foundation was helping to build. There were no traces left of the spoiled girl who had arrived there, desperate, a year before. "I'm proud of you, child," Helena said, her voice soft but firm. "You found your family's true treasure, and it wasn't locked in any vault." That same day, Veronica received a letter. It was from her father. After months of silence, he had written, the audit had left him with a fraction of his former fortune, enough for a comfortable life, but a far cry from the empire he had commanded. In the letter, he didn't ask for forgiveness, perhaps because he didn't know how. But, for the first time, he acknowledged his wrongdoing, admitting his betrayal of Dmitri. At the end, he wrote, "Your grandmother was right. I built a tower that was too tall. Perhaps you, in your foundation, are building something stronger, with its foundations in the earth." Veronica folded the letter, a sense of closure washing over her. The wound with her father might never fully heal, but the anger had dissipated, replaced by a melancholic understanding. Her journey, which had begun with the loss of everything she valued, had led her to find a different kind of wealth, a fortune of purpose and dignity that no stock market crash could ever take away. She looked out at the horizon. At the city she now saw with new eyes. Her empire was no longer a marble building, but the lives she could touch and transform. In an act of cruelty, she had lost a kingdom, but by embracing humility, she had found herself and built a legacy infinitely more valuable.